Hi guys, Gary here from the Graphters Podcast. Just me, temporarily, only for a moment. Just to let you know that this late episode is because John and I were having an amazing conversation with our guest. Our guest is Paul Coulthard, who is the lead storyboard artist and occasionally co-director at Axis Studios. He's a wonderful guy, and we were having so much fun that we ended up talking to for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So no one's got time to listen to all of that. And even when I got rid of all the pauses and some of the ers, it still was 1 hour and 40 minutes. So yeah, no one's got time to listen to all of that in one go. So it's been broken up into 2 podcasts, and I hope you enjoy them both. Anyway, back to the usual broadcasting. Bye. So on that note,
yeah, we just very quickly, we were like. A friend of mine from Lenovo, James, dropped into conversation that, I found a podcast, that I was on a long journey, found a podcast, and I found it absolutely delightful. And you know the podcast. And I'm thinking, what have I suggested for it?
What is it? What's it?
And it happened to be ours. And he said, like 2 men in a pub chatting away, and you're on the other table listening in. I thought, well, do you know what? I'll take that.
Oh, he was talking about your podcast.
Yeah. It was. It took me ages to get to the bottom of.
What awful podcast is this I hear? Welcome to the Graphters Podcast.
Hello, Gary.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm brilliant. I'm really good. It's been a couple of exciting weeks on the road. Post FMX, I was absolutely jet lagged to bits. Didn't stop, had no voice. It was fantastic. But I came back, not on a stretcher this time. So it was a bonus.
That is definitely better.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about you?
I'm good, you know.
How's the new gig? How's the life?
Backwards and forwards in my chair, wondering what I'm going to be doing. That's how I'm rocking. No, it's good. I mean, it's a bit of it's going back to freelance. It's always going to be a bit of a surprise. And you know, I put up my first invoice in yesterday, just to be able to actually do that and feel like I've broken the duck of being, you know, like having actually, you know, fiscal freelance work that's going in, which is great. And there's lots of other irons that are currently sitting in a fire, getting hotter and hotter, and one of them's going to suddenly leap out and jump me in the hand and probably take off my palm. But I'll be happily grabbing hold of it, because that's how it is when you were a freelance. You know, you've got to pretty much grab things by the horns and go and pull them.
It was very strange today going to Media City and not meeting up for a coffee, I must admit.
Well, I wasn't there.
It was very strange. No, but I did go for the coffee. Sat like Billy No Mates in the Costa.
Oh, Billy No Mates, yes. No, I'm actually, I'm a firm believer in being Billy No Mates myself, actually, sometimes. I have to say, I had a mental block on something today. This is just by the by. I had a real mental block on something I was working on. And I thought, what is this? I'm not going to know what I'm doing. I can't know what I'm doing. So I'd already told myself I was going to go, because we've got a treadmill in the garage. So I said, right, I'm going to go on the treadmill. And I knew that was planned. So it was about 12 o'clock, and I went, I'm going to the treadmill. I've eaten too many biscuits, and I really go and work out what I'm doing. So I went and I put on, and you're going to like this, I literally went to Spotify and just typed in epic instrumental for running. It was like 2 Steps from Hell, you know, ES Posthumous. It was all the best cinematic trailer music you've ever heard was in front of me. And 6 kilometres later, I was like, I've got it! It was great, because there was no words, nothing to interrupt my brain flow. It was just running, staring at the back concrete wall of the garage, going, oh yes, I can do this, yes! And every time it was like, it was just, every time now, if I'm here, if I'm working in the home office, I will always go to the garage and if I have a mental block, because it was the best. It was great. It relieved everything. Just it ran away the stupidity of not working. It was like having writer's block. It was literally like writer's block, and that's horrible. I've had that as well.
It's good you're fit enough now to get back to that sort of thing.
I'm getting there.
You know, get back to running. Yeah. I mean, I was up at training at Taekwondo last night, and I've literally had a month off between not going on the bank holidays because we don't train on a bank holiday. So 2 bank holidays meant we weren't there, and then there was the FMX, trip and everything else. So I actually went in the fittest form I've been for a long time, with no aches and pains. Made sure everybody had a good stretch, including myself, and it just came back with a real buzz about, things are good, work's good, everything seems to be falling into place, and got the bug back, because sometimes you get to train, and when you're teaching it all the time, it's hard work.
Absolutely.
Hard
work. But you're feeling good. I'm feeling good. Everything's on the up. I was listening to cinematic trailer music today, and work's going well. I mean, it's almost like we are introducing the person who is in the other end of this call without even actually doing it.
Absolutely.
I think
we caught him by surprise.
He can unmute himself now. Hello, guest.
Hello,
hosts. So,
some cultured voices on the line.
So, John, would you like to explain roughly who we have, and then he can tell us a little bit more?
I will certainly do that. So, when I began, and I've done it again, I am going to be the first one to drop the B word. When I began my little journey into Blender,
steady
Blender, I started obviously researching lots and lots of different ways that we could actually utilize it within the classroom. And with our animation course, I was very keen to make use of the 2D tool set within Blender. And I stumbled across our guest.
Was he sitting in a doorway?
Not at all. But he had some of the most fantastic just video breakdowns of how to use grease pencil in 2D animatic sequencing. And that's where I stumbled upon our guest. So, and I reached out immediately, as I do, and most of the time people ignore me. But he responded and said, "Of course I'll do a call. Why not? Let's see what we can talk about." And we had a really thoroughly, good couple of conversations. And then I went and left education, and he got extremely busy. And I believe some congratulations in co-director now on projects. I saw that today, so congrats to that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul.
Hello,
Paul.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, guys. My name's Paul. I'm now I'm a storyboard artist, storyboard supervisor, and now sometime co-director as well, depending on the project. If the right project comes along and they're able to facilitate that, I've done 2 of those now. I guess where I come from in terms of, I won't go back too far. Well, let's go all the way back.
Just go all the way back.
We're going.
All right. So when I was 3 years old, when for about a month, 3 or 4 years old, for about a month, I wouldn't answer to any other name than Dog Tanyan.
Neither would I.
So
Musket hounds are always ready.
They are, man. They're always ready. But that was I don't know. I've always, as kids do, you always love animation. But I was particularly obsessive about Dog Tanyan for one, and then another one I would cite is Mysterious Cities of Gold. That was a huge deal for me.
Absolute
huge. I used to run, and they never played the last episode on British TV. I had to wait until I was in uni, and I got it pirated to see the end.
You acquired it by a sharing mean. Yes, not pirates. Yeah, obviously, pirates were involved.
Not pirating. No. You can beep that dreaded word out. I was eventually came out on DVD as well. But
so I introduced my son to Hercules.
Do you mean Ulysses 31?
Ulysses, that's it. Yes, Ulysses 2030 or something
Ulysses
like that, wasn't it?
31. 31.
31. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely brilliant, but all from the same sort of genre of animation. But before that, there were the I've literally just been watching it. The it'll come to me. Never mind. We'll move on. This is why there's always so many long pauses.
Describe it to me, or us. We'll both get it.
It had a robot on it that looked like R2-D2.
It's 7 Zark 7. It's Battle of the Planets.
Battle of the Planets. There you go.
Originally called Gatchaman.
Oh, right.
When it was in its original form.
The 80s was great.
80s.
We had Wicked.
I was literally saying this morning. My daughter is about to go do a history degree, And I was saying, things were always better. I mean, everyone knows that the 80s were the best. 80s was the best. And it was. The 80s were the bloody best.
The animation had all the best theme tunes. And I would say, I'll stake this right now, still say it, Thundercats, in my opinion, in terms of the not necessarily theme tune, the theme tune's great. That intro is still the best intro to any TV show ever made. It's perfect. You want to study flow and composition and creativity in an intro, it's just the best. It's so good. Japanese, this is obviously Japanese animated that intro, and if you've ever seen, the X-Men 93, the one it was 93 I think, X-Men the Marvel one. If you find the Japanese intro, because you watch the American intro and it's janky as hell, right? You watch the Japanese version of the X-Men intro, it's so much better. Anyway. So yeah,
Paul, this is exactly what the podcast is about. It's about delving into
just riffing off onto complete tangents about lovely 80s.
The bottom drawer of where you came from. That's where we want to be.
Well, here's you're talking about the bottom drawer of where you came from, but I mean, you don't look like you would have been having knowledge of much stuff from the 80s.
I was a child in the 80s. I've just turned 40.
You've just what?
I've just turned 40.
Seriously,
God, he only looks like
you look about 25, dude. and I'm not just saying that, honestly. I tell you what, do me a favour. Move that microphone a bit to the left. Come closer to the camera. Let's just compare wrinkles, shall we?
No, don't.
Well, I live in Wales, so I'd have to import lots of Scottish water to drink Scottish water. Even though I work for Axis, I live in Wales still. I work remotely, but just to kind of riff on because I love talking about these shows, retro shows. Is there was what struck me about Mysterious Cities Gold, right, was the sense of adventure and the continuous story of it, because the trend in Western storytelling was not that in kids TV, right? It was episodic. It was Monster of the Week, but it was only stuff that was generally coming from or a co-production with Japanese stuff that had those bigger arcs, like Ulysses. I think Ulysses is co-production Japanese.
The original Transformers.
Yeah. The movie.
Very episodic. And a long narrative that took you all the way through the series.
They all were.
To the end.
I mean, they all were. It was. I mean, there was nothing really that wasn't episodic until, would it have been the very early 90s, when a guy who used to write, and I know I'm a bit of a fan, and people can shout at me and swear at me whatever they like, but there was a guy who used to write for Star Trek, and he came up with an idea for a show which he tried to sell to the people who were running Star Trek Next Gen, pardon me, and they basically told him to no, it was rubbish, take it away. So he then went to, I think it was Warner's at the time, Time Warner maybe, I can't remember exactly, and he sold them the idea for Babylon 5, which was a 5 series with an arc from the beginning to the very end.
Superb.
It's absolutely 100%.
I mean, it looks like
oh yes, of course it does. I mean,
but the writing is superb.
But it looks there of its time. I mean, you look at the 3D on that now. I mean, I watch it now. I literally have been watching it recently, and I kind of go, I love the stories, love the acting. Everything about it, there's bits ripped from Lord of the Rings, but there's lots ripped from Lord of the Rings. Does Zahadum sound a bit like Kazakh Doom? Yes, it does. There's all this sort of but it's wonderful, and it was the first big show that was episodic, and it was after that everything sort of started to become thematic, travelling through. It wasn't until that series came out, there was nothing out there, especially in terms of science fiction, that had anything like that in terms of its through plot. Nothing.
I mean, speaking of science fiction writers,
was it?
I was brought up on I was on Terry Pratchett. I mean, anything to do with the Discworld and the way that those stories were narrated. But you could literally close your eyes and as you're very difficult to describe, closing your eyes and reading. But as you're reading, you kind of on the back of your eyelids, you're seeing the pictures as well.
The best, the best film ever is the one you see on the back of your eyelids.
That's why adaptations are always such a difficult thing to do, right? Because you can't possibly you can never beat what's in people's minds because everyone's got their own version. Like even in Lord of the Rings, you know, I think the adaptations of the films, the Peter Jackson ones, were pretty good. They were a little bit actiony compared to the books have a more I would say mythic feel to them. They're slightly more. You are intimate with the characters, but there's something more ethereal about Tolkien than there is about Peter Jackson's trilogy. But they've still.
Do you think, Paul? Do you think those early cartoons certainly imprinted upon you as you then went into your should we call them the formative years?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I mean, I don't know about yourself, but certainly when I was at school, I was told you can't do anything in art because there's no money in it. And
well, that's still quite true.
That is, well, I was going to say largely that has a technical resonance, but if you are in the digital realm, I would disagree that there is a lot of money in the creation of digital art now, and certainly in content production.
Yeah. So in terms of like did those things, like the reason I go back there because I think there's always a nice little story, right, of like what was the show that you loved as a kid, what was the show you liked a little bit later, what was the film that changed your mind, all that kind of stuff. I think that is that puts you on the track, right? Because I can trace it back. So Dogtanian when I was 3 wouldn't answer to that any other name for a month. Then Mysterious Cities of Gold was like, it captured my sense of adventure and imagination and my want to have long form storytelling in animation. That then kind of just, you know, lingered there. And then when I was 11, before we go there, the other thing about childhood stuff, especially back then, like in the 70s or 80s, for me it was the 80s, the stuff I'd seen as a kid, that stuff wasn't easily available. It took years and years and years before that stuff would come out on like a DVD box set or something like that. So you always kind of like, and you had seen something on Channel 4 at like 3 o'clock in the morning, your father taped it or something, and you didn't really know what it was. You remembered images from it. There was, you know, like Miyazaki's Laputa and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, right? Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, right? It was called Warriors of the Wind when it came over here, and they cut 40 minutes out of it, I found out later, in the version we had in the UK, right? But what had happened is images from it had stuck in my memory, like the insects, right? And the insects attacking, and Yupa, the mentor with the bald head, and the fact that someone had something ripped off them and replaced with robotics, right? But in my mind, what that was this story about a guy who had his head replaced with like a metal head on top, and there was the insect. So I was looking for a film with those specific criteria, so I couldn't find it, right? And it wasn't until then, when I was in uni and I got massively into Miyazaki, that then I saw it and thought, I think this is the film that I was looking for. Which is pretty amazing that like you come around to those influences, you know, because they kind of speak to you at a very like authentic and sort of raw level when you're younger. And it's not just nostalgia, because I couldn't remember enough about it for it to have been nostalgia. It was just something pure about it, and I really related. I really loved those. Like I really like Miyazaki as well. But jump into what I was going to say about 11. The big one for me was Akira. So we used to go, I just remember the first time I ever saw it. My father taped it off Channel 4 for me. I was about 11. And of course, you know, if you have not seen something like Akira, and you're used to Disney and you're used to kids' TV shows, and then you see Akira, my mind just blew. It just blew my mind wide open. And
did it get really, really big and explode inside a
stadium? It did. Yes, I did. Totally. I started morphing into a massive blobular flobby thing. But and then I created a supernova and a new universe, and nobody understood what was happening at the end. But it was. But yeah, man, that really blew my mind. And even though I was too young to understand how much it blew my mind, it absolutely did. Because then I started looking for other things. And I started looking for... And this was the time then when Japanese animation was starting to be brought over. So, again, Channel 4, just 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, Ghost in the Shell, or not then because it hadn't come out, but you know, whatever was the first wave of stuff that was coming over, you know, like Dominion Tank Police, or not the tentacle stuff. I didn't see any of that when I was a kid, but
yes,
yeah, it was kind of like,
but when you were a bit older, right?
Yeah, and then it was like, you know, you and your mates would be like, have you seen these animations that are like really violent and there's loads of swearing in them, and they were so like, you know, when you're a teenager.
Legend of the Overfiend. It was horrible.
yeah. Yeah, and like Fist of the North Star and stuff as well, you know. But
Yeah.
it was just so. I mean, when it was so edgy then, you know, and they would put. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry, we will be coming back to our questions, but carry on.
Yeah, do you know about what 15ing is? The process of 15ing. I'm fascinated because I wrote an essay on Japanese animation in uni, and I found this out, right. So when Japanese animation first came up, was being brought over basically by Manga Entertainment, were the only ones doing it, right. What they would do is they realized that because it's the main appeal was like teenage boys, right? So if it had a 15 if they could get a 15 certificate or an 18 certificate, that would make it more like, oh my god, what's that? What is in that animation, right? And that worked completely because I would go into the video store and I'd be like, I need to see that 18, and I'd get someone to rent it for me or whatever, right? But what they would do is when they would have the scripts through, they would add unnecessary swearing to the English dub so that it would bump the rating up to a 15, and it was called 15ing. It was brilliant. It worked. It absolutely worked.
Absolutely, yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
That is absolutely brilliant. I actually watched Death Note.
Oh,
you mean the Netflix thing?
Yeah, the Netflix thing. But when you're talking about that goriness, you know, they were very visceral in the way that they, you know, showcased. You know, they tried to stay as close to the anime as they possibly could, and obviously it's a big thing there.
But it doesn't work because it westernizes it just by accident. Even though they're trying their hardest.
What it does is it opens a window, and then people will go and find the real stuff, and then they'll fall in love with it all over again.
I think everybody's filmic history, what the films they watch. There are several ones that, you know, top of my list, and you know what those are. But one of the films that I think everybody should see is Battle Royale.
Oh yeah, it's a great film.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. I mean, everyone. It's like people hear about it, and then they find out what it is, and they're like, ugh. But then you think about it, and that's the Hunger Games. Basically, is built off the back of that.
Yeah, you know? And I mean,
Whale Tamer.
and also Fortnite.
Right. Oh, yes.
Literally. Yeah. What an original idea. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty
moving
wild.
Quickly on.
I've not seen that some time now, but yeah, it was that came out when I was in uni, and it was really, that's a wild film. I bought it and on video, and it was I
remember
really
what you said
film.
about Akira. I had exactly the same experience, which is never really seen anything like that.
No, I don't think anyone
basically
had
watching
in the
a
West.
movie that's been drawn, been drawn, and it's just kind of unpainted. And I remember the flickering sign at the beginning, and I'm just like, you know, this is just what the hell is this? This can't be a cartoon. This is not a cartoon.
Well,
no, it's not. It's like a graphic novel.
Speaking of which, you know, I'd put Watership Down on that list because that was, you know, late 70s. Talk about, you know, demystifying bunny rabbits, cute little things, and you know, there you have the whole, you know, diatribe of you know, political affairs going on, just literally, and the fight for survival.
Absolutely,
and also the deity, you know, believing in the belief system of something else. You know, remember with the car coming across, they call it the Rondaroo or something, as it the noise it made as it went past. Yeah, Roo-doo-doo. It went.
Dad read it to me when I was little, when we were in the caravan on holiday. I never. There's like a Efrafa as well. That's something else. And anyway, let's. I'm going to fight to get back to these questions. So, how long have you been drawing? It sounds like you've been drawing since you were about 3.
Well, yeah,
basically.
I don't really know. Yeah, all the time, I guess. I mean, I always liked art, basically, and then when I was in my teens, I got big into, you know, Japanese animation in general, films, and then I did art in school, obviously, but then I was being encouraged to go and do a product design course in university.
Yeah, I
went to the interviews, and they didn't go great. And I didn't have any real interest in it. It was just that's the only thing anyone could think of to say, you like creating stuff, go and design shampoo bottles.
It's kind of like the similar thing to what Chris McFall was saying when he was on, isn't it? Where he ended up in a sort of in the wrong course, but it actually gave him the skills.
Right, that could work. Yeah.
To sort of go and hunt down what he needed to do, which, you know, you're probably, you know, being a 40-year-old, and obviously
2 years old.
We're around the other mark, a decade later on. but it was still a time, and we were. I was talking about this today at one of the events I was at today. You know that there was a time when we had to go and figure things out. You know, we had to go. We had to figure out stuff, and now you've got technology figuring things out for you. So it's almost the reverse opposite, isn't it? And we had a little brief talk in the interlude about AI, the last podcast, and
brief interlude.
It was like the first half of the episode.
It was quite a lot of it.
So did you go to sixth form college? Was college the first step?
No, we had a comprehensive school, so it was sixth form.
Whereabouts were you raised? Was it
Aberdeen, South Wales, Aberdeen? Blangwawr
and
comprehensive school.
And the university of choice.
And my university of so I was encouraged to go and do product design, right? Because no one had the imagination to notice that I liked animation and that was a thing you could do. So I think this comes back to what I was saying earlier, like careers advice. You know, I don't know what that's like now. I hope it's improved. It probably hasn't. But they would come in and they'd say, what are you passionate about? Well, they wouldn't even ask that, right? You'd say, oh, I really feel like I could do something in art or something, right? And they'd say, have you thought about being a banker? Or have you thought about being
an accountant?
An accountant's the usual one, isn't it? But it's like, I mean, it always, especially now, I can imagine it's just as bad now, but it would be even more flabbergasting if it is, because how do people think that all of this insane amount of content that's currently being produced, who do they think is producing it?
Accountants.
Well,
it's the elves. The elves do
right,
it.
The elves, yeah. but that always blows my mind. So anyway, I was so put off by the interviews and by the fact that I was going in. I was like, I don't think I want to design shampoo bottles. I don't think that's my passion. Because every project I would do in in sixth form or before that was, and I hadn't noticed it, was to do with animation. Even if I was doing a painting, it would be like a multi-frame movement in the painting or something like that. Or I would be trying to do a storyboard or something. And again, I didn't really put it together, you know, and it wasn't something that I realized, oh, maybe I could actually do that. So it wasn't until I then decided, no, I'm going to do a 1-year foundation course in Pontypridd, Glyntaf. At the time, I think they still do the foundation there, but the rest of it's moved down to Cardiff now. But that was basically like an absolute all-you-can-eat buffet of everything art. So you would do, like, you know, you did drawing, you did painting, you did sculpting, you did photography, you did fine art, you did something else. There was definitely something else, but it was the most intense year to date, and probably honestly still one of the most intense years of my life in terms of output. Because they are relentless. That course was relentless. You were out, you were drawing, you were like halfway up a road drawing on a massive thing, you were sculpting, it was just like boom, boom, boom. You did more in that 1 year than you probably did the entirety of the rest of your time in
To be fair, foundation of anybody that you know needs that extra bit of confidence, foundation courses certainly are so valuable. And you know, please, funding bodies, keep funding them, and especially fund them for 18 plus, because you haven't made your minds up in the creative sector until at least in your mid-20s.
I'm 53 and I'm still guessing,
still undecided.
And we're into the Baz Luhrmann's wear sunscreen. And there was no university to follow that then?
Yeah. So
with the foundation?
So the foundation, but I still didn't know what I was doing, right? Which was the point of the foundation. Yeah. And it gave me enough room to play and to kind of, start expressing myself and just playing and nicely as well, talking to other people. I didn't have to, there was less disclaimers in the conversation. I didn't have to explain what Akira was anymore. I didn't, isn't it nice when you finally meet people like that?
You find your people.
You find your people in uni. And I think that, like, this is a bigger thing. Maybe we can come back to you later about what would online learning versus uni courses now, right? In terms of like bang for your buck and everything, I think that's a real question. But the one thing you absolutely do get for uni is that you find your people, man, and you have those conversations, and that creative buzz is I don't think you can put a price on that. So I was there, and I was kind of edging towards illustration because was there an animation course? No, I think they added it the year I was there. So at the very end of the foundation course, you could choose a speciality. And I think I was probably going to go like illustration just because that was the closest thing to what I was interested in. But they then added an animation one, right? Well, you didn't actually get to animate anything, if I remember correctly. But it was geared towards animation. So it was like storyboards. Yeah. It was, concept art for characters. And it was just all stuff related to that good stuff. So I picked that. And then once I did that, immediately it was like, oh, this storyboarding thing is... I like this. And I was quite sort of not good at it, but I had an affinity for it. With regards to like, say, what I was like versus my peers at that time, I just kind of got it quicker than other people. And it was a language that I could speak quite just naturally. I just naturally gravitated towards it. So then I did the animation course that was there, which was a 3-year animation course, which I did 2D animation. So lots and lots and lots of drawing. My animations were very, very like loose and rough and expressive. I looked back at those a little while ago, and they kind of made me a little bit sad because I was so raw then. You know, when you look, I think I've lost that because I had to kind of like hone myself professionally. So you sometimes you lose that edge, like that absolutely raw edge you might have had.
It's interesting listening to the passion coming out there, Paul, and a 2D artist can talk about their original drawings as this raw, energetic, conceptual thing. A 3D modeler, when they first start modeling, however, wouldn't talk about their first models at all. That would be, we better just leave those alone.
Yeah. Let's leave that House of Death that I did from Terry Pratchett's Mort. Let's just leave that completely on a shelf somewhere, in a box, locked up with a very large key.
I did meet a gentleman today called James at the event that I was at, who is I think he's certainly mature in his 30s now, a bricklayer, builder, someone that was on the tools and has decided to learn 3D. He wants to be a visualizer. And what a fantastic way of, making a career change, because he's passionate about doing it. And, he was talking about being in a forum and finding his people that were helping him now. And he said in the 2 months he's been on this forum, his work has just accelerated. It's getting better and better and better. And it kind of, that's a resonance, that I think, and I think I know where you were alluding to there, Paul, when you said we should come back to this. But there is a closeted nature now, I think, of the generation that we have as the education generation that are out now, that have grown up on media content. They've grown up in isolation. If we go back to the 70s and 80s, we would be talking to our mates about watching a cartoon. We'd be running in to go and watch the cartoon. And then running back out again after tea, and finishing off the game of whatever we were playing, or whatever it was.
Well, that was Doctor Who when I was a kid.
You made sure
did everyone see Doctor Who on Saturday? Oh yeah,
everybody watched it at the same time. Yeah. Literally everybody watched it at the same time. Yeah. So there's kind of been a little bit of a disconnect, I think, between the communalism of sharing that experience as you've watched it. And the whole don't tell me, no spoilers. I'll watch it tonight on iPlayer or whatever it is that whichever media platform of choice you decide to choose.
So many of them are available.
So many of them. So I'm gonna jump into this then. So where was your first break into industry? When did that happen? How did that occur then, Paul? Because you've done all this stuff. You've got all this. You start to find the passion, and you found the courses that are starting to give you that honing and everything else. So how did the big break or the little break come along?
Yeah, so by the end of the third year, they also kind of... Actually, the third year allowed you to specialise in something that wasn't necessarily animated. Did it? No, it didn't. I still had to make a bloody animated film, and it was rubbish because I didn't want to do it anymore by that point. I'd realised it was storyboarding that I wanted to do. Yeah. But I was allowed to do all these mini projects that were storyboarding, right? So at least I was doing that. Yeah. But I still had to crank out this thing, and I was in a terrible headspace at the time, and my third year was a rough year for me mentally. But so anyway, again, everything was just like, again, pointed right back to storyboarding again, right? So what happened then was I came out of uni and then worked in factories for about 2.5 years. I think it might have been 3 years.
Yeah, so that was the only option, wasn't it? There was no like, you did your bread and butter stuff with, let's get should we call it the job you don't want to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to do while you're trying to get the job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I think thinking back at it, if I'm being honest about my approach, I probably didn't try hard enough constantly either. I think what it was at the time is myself and my girlfriend at the time, not my wife, we talked a lot about creating comics and stuff. We still haven't actually got around to doing them yet, but
The procrastination. Crew. Yeah,
but,
we do that as well.
But I think I remember. Oh my god! Yeah, I've had a flashback. I sent what I thought was, right, okay, what's related to comic books or what's related to storyboards that is a normal job? Like, so I thought, oh, maybe working in a printers, right? That has a connection.
Yeah.
But on my CV, when I wrote it in, I basically said, I want to be a comic book artist, but I think I could come and work here and learn what I need to know. You know, it was like such a, I don't really want to work with you, but it was, I shouldn't have written stuff like that, but I did because I was so self-absorbed with that like idea, you know, that's what I was going to do. And these jobs were just, you know, it wasn't the right attitude. But after a while, and I sort of gave up on that sort of pursuit anyway. And I would just work in the factories, and then I would do like storyboarding projects and stuff. But I had made a connection during uni on one of the like careers days, basically, where one of the tutors had brought in a guy called Gary Hurst, who runs Hurst Animation down here, and we had just met very, very briefly. Nothing came of it. But then out of uni, like 2.5 years later, something like that, he just gave me a call out of the blink. But he kind of like, it was like an emergency thing. You know, he phoned me. He needed to deliver this board, and there was, you know, he needed an extra pair of hands, basically, right? Of someone who could draw at least. So he called me up, and I was at my girlfriend's at the time, and he picked me up. It's quite vivid. Like, he picked me up. I had these absolutely shredded jeans on because I was a bit grungy and stuff. And he was like ripping the piss out of me and everything, right? Anyway, we took me to his house. I did the evening's work with him. I did a terrible job. Terrible. Because I just wasn't professional in the way that I drew. Like I was saying, I was quite messy and raw, right? So I hadn't honed that, like, trying to draw like a professional thing yet. I was, you know, I kind of had to try and do it over a weekend, like when he was offering me some more work. Because I was very rough. But, anyway, I didn't do a good job, but he still kind of had me back for a bit more. And then he was opening a studio for Mike Young, who was the, you know, like the creator of Super Ted. We had a studio down here in Bridgend, and Gary was
S4,
running
S4C?
that studio.
No, it's not S4C, is it? What is it?
Yeah, it's S4C.
S4C, yeah.
S4C or Cartoon Comrie, I can never remember the which, but yeah. So Gary, then when that actually happened, it was a number that was like, oh, we got a studio, it might be opening, you know, blah blah blah, and it kind of fell. And I remember the job that I was going to do just before I got that phone call. I was going to go and be a learning support assistant in a comprehensive school, and I was really excited about that because I really had a great interview with the woman. I felt like the woman running that learning support, you know, the disabled unit or whatever, was just, she had a fantastic attitude, and we really connected, and I thought, this is going to be great. And then on that weekend, just before I was going to go and do that job, Gary phoned me and offered me, you know, to come and work and follow the storyboarding thing. So I didn't go through with that learning support job afterwards. But so then I was a what would we call them back then? Like, I was a cleanup artist to begin with, right? So I wouldn't draw anything from scratch. I would take the rough drawings, and this is when we were working on paper, really inefficient, right? A3 sheets of paper with 2 pictures on it, and then like 60% of the space on the page was just blank, and then you write the dialogue. It was ridiculous. You know, boards were.
Is it any surprise we've got no bloody trees left?
Boards like we used to have before we went digital. Stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks, right? And the nightmare of trying to reframe a shot. You have to go to the. So you got to beep if you.
I'll bleep them out. Don't worry.
The first bleep.
No, it's not actually. Paul said earlier on
today,
and so that's got to go as well, just like mine is that I've just said just then.
you had to go to the photocopier. You had to photocopy every single panel down to, say, 60%. You had to then sellotape them back on, white, whatever that's, white out, then the round.
Tip-X out the bits.
Tip-X out the right.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was just an absolute mess, and it took ages, right? And if you had to renumber like 600 pages, if you went wrong halfway through, which we always did somehow, you'd have to renumber it all. Absolute nightmare. Anyway, so I did clean up for, I don't know, it was kind of this progression, right, where I was doing cleanup, a couple of years later, I saw the boards that I had done for him, and I said, Gary, how the f*** did you keep me on, mate? These were terrible. They were so bad. But anyway, as I kind of settled into that studio, it was actually an in-house position. It actually ended up being like a 4-year in-house position down here, which is why I live really here now instead of Aberdeen. I moved down here for this job. It's long gone now, but it was the first job I had, and I was there for like from the first day to the last day of the studio. It was about 4.5 years, and from that I basically went from cleanup artist to then revisionist. So I was given, I was actually allowed to do the revisions, with approvals and stuff. Obviously, I had to get that approved with Gary, and Gary was pretty much the only guy that I was working under. There were other people there who were also a big influence on me, like Chris Evans and Lee Huxtable were another two guys who were there. We were just great pals, and they were all veterans of the industry and everything to varying degrees, and I had different skill sets and everything. So anyway, I went up to revisionist, which is great because I really got into that because it was thinking involved in that. It was problem solving, which is the key component to why I love doing what I do. There's just so many ways to do anything, and I just love the puzzle. Everything is why, even though I've done countless things now, even professionally or personally, every one of them is exciting to me because it's a new puzzle to solve every single time. And anyway, so I was cleanup, then I was revisionist, then I was like a lead revisionist because we had other revisionists, and I was like taking a bit of responsibility. Then Gary would give me smaller but incrementally bigger opportunities to actually try boarding stuff out. And the great thing about Gary, right, he was a very firm...
Thank you.
He was a very, very firm mentor, right? He was quite firm. Like, there was a lot of stuff that would end up, in the bin in front of you, right? But the key thing, and this is the key, every single time he did that, he would right there in front of me show me exactly what I should have done. Right there live. Like, bang, done it, right? So
total mentorship.
And explaining to me why he's just, chucked my stuff in the bin and done it differently, right? Yeah. And then if you're listening and you're paying attention to someone like that, you're going to learn. And that's what I did. And I learned. I listened, I learned. And over that time, I would say, in terms of foundation and in terms of all of the real principles of storyboarding and everything, came from that mentorship and that time that I was there. And the fact also that we worked on a lot of 3D shows. So we didn't get away with doing all your little left to right stuff that you can get away with on flash shows. This was 3D. It was proper staging, proper like 180. You had to be on top of where everything was and whether it was going to work in the space that you had to work with. So it was a really good mentorship. And then by the end of us leaving, when the studio went down for financial reasons, I was then storyboarding. I think by the end of it, I was like almost like I think I was a fully fledged storyboarder by the end of it. I was being given episodes, and then when it all went down, we decided to all stick together so we could still take on bigger projects. Because if you go freelance on your own storyboard artist, all you can take on is a handful of episodes from a series. If you stick together with a group, you can take the entire series. So that's what we did then for a number.
I'm just going to quickly check. Can you read our scripts, Paul? Because you are literally going down you're going down our narration like either we've written this really well, or
I think we've done a cracking job actually there, John.
I think we have. Well done, Gary.
Very, very good. Well, good work for both of us.
I think the next one's yours.
It is, but there's an interim one leading to the next one, if that's okay. When you are doing storyboards, are you given direction by the director as to what you need to get from A to B or A to C via B during the course of the board, or do you feel a bit like with previous that you have more control over what the camera's going to do?
Mm-hmm. Somewhere between those two things. So you will always and should always have a director to brief you. that's certainly, it's the director that comes with the creative vision for the project, especially on things that are as short as cinematics, right? So on a series, a director, it still performs that role, absolutely, right? But it's to a lesser granular amount usually, because a director will have multiple 10, 15-minute episodes running at the same time, right? You can't expect them to like have thought about every shot or anything, and you don't need them to anyway, right? It's like script writing. Script writers, please, script writers, stop writing pan into the script, right? Don't tell me the camera moves. That's not your job. Your job is to tell me the dialogue and the story. Don't tell me the camera moves. Yeah. It takes too much space for one thing when they start describing camera moves. Anyway, so a little tangent there.
Yeah, it's not a script. It's not really a script writer's job to do that. They are literally there to make a story, not to give camera directions.
Plus, they use the terms wrong all the time. Everything's a pan. You can't pan in, people. You can't pan in. All right, it's not possible to pan in. Right.
I've got to ask you a very direct question now.
Yeah.
So who was it?
I'll come back to the director question in a minute, though. If you
no, this is to do with directing. So who was it who briefed you on the storyboards for Pip Ahoy?
Aha, Gary.
Right. Okay.
Gary would have briefed me, even though, I cannot remember if Gary was officially a director on Pip Ahoy, or if it would have been David Osborne. Is that a name? For some reason.
Dave Osborne.
Osborne. I never.
And then the other guy called John, who is no character, but unfortunately John died recently.
Never.
Died a few years back now.
Right. I never spoke to either of those directors. It was all funneled through Gary, right? So Gary would have whatever information that he was going to get given by the Cosgrove Hall guys, basically, and then he would.
That was me. One of those was me, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
You have indirectly worked together.
What was your job in Cosgrove Hall?
And I was brought in to do the pipe, because I'd done pipelines for production. I was doing the pipelines on that, so I was there setting up. The first thing I did was set up all the equipment with Danny, and then make sure all the machines had all the right software on. And then I sat there and pipelined it. And then they did another show, and I'd done some 3D elements for them, and I made some 3D stuff for them for Pip Ahoy. And then they had two other shows which came in, one which never made off the ground, and the other one was Daisy and Ollie. I was working on the other one.
I saw that one coming.
Get off the ground.
I saw Daisy and Ollie coming through as well, storyboards wise. Pip was I got nice memories of Pip. It was a sweet little show. That was really. It was very easy. It was very easy to board. But it was always, I don't know, there was something about it. It's kind of a little charm about it. I really liked drawing the characters. I loved drawing Pip with his little tufts, on his hair and everything. Yeah. I loved Alan the Penguin was my favorite character.
Alan was everyone's favorite.
Bounce.
Yeah, Alan. And the seagull with the one leg.
Yeah. What was his name?
What was his name? It wasn't that.
I hope
it definitely
wasn't.
He had one leg, didn't he? He had one leg. Wasn't it? It wasn't like Hopper or something. Was it? Was it Hopper?
I can't remember now.
I know there was a crab called Pasty, wasn't it?
That's right. Pasty was the crab. He actually had the crimping around the top of his edge.
Oh, you're gonna have to find out
drawing. You could actually see. He actually looked like a pasty with legs.
Yeah, but that was a nice one. That was a cute little show. But in terms of back to your director question, then in terms of like what are you usually given, or what do you expect, or how do you fit into that process? So you certainly expect the director to come prepared, don't you, and have at least a good chunk of clarity about what they want to do with this. I always think of it as thinking of like tent poles. No one's gonna be able to see me doing this, but I'm making like a tent.
Well, don't worry, we can see it.
If you think of the way
Paul is describing a tent, like a big top tent
with
pole.
like dips between the tent poles.
Dips between.
So I think the director needs to bring those tent poles. Right, the director needs to go, this is exactly what I want here. This is the point of this bit here. I want you to do this here. And then the dip is what I call the space in between, and that's where we get to do our bit. And if we understand enough about the tent poles, then the
magic happens in the middle.
Yeah, and it's also like I like that space because that's the bit that I get to kind of like inject myself into it and pitch something forward to the director. They might not go for it, right? But they might. And the best thing is when a director you give something to a director and go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is it? Even though you didn't say it to me?
It's really good listening to this, Paul, because if you have listened to any of the podcasts, there is a project, like a project that I've got rolling around in my head that I'm sort of gathering momentum on for work experience. Cool. And we're desperately seeking a mechanism to give meaningful work experience to those students at A level / further education, college level. And just talking about those tent poles actually now just has just literally light bulbs on said, actually, if we can create those tent poles as scene files with a little bit of narration, a document that goes with it and says, this is what we're trying to achieve. Now you go animate that and make that happen. And this is what the other tent pole looks like.
Wouldn't it be better, John, though, if we had someone, I don't know, someone with a certain set of skills who could, in fact, maybe do the storyboarding for us? Or at least point us in the direction.
Or even ask. But if you know anybody, Paul, do let us know.
I might know who's storyboarding.
This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. Any opinions stated during the course of this podcast belong purely to myself and to John and are based at the time that we record this. The theme music is My Everything by DJ Quads. If you like that, and I'm sure you probably did, there is a lot more of his great stuff which you can find at soundcloud.com/DJ Quads, or his music is also promoted by www.free-stock-music.com.